Hi, I'm Chris Radimer from Tiddly Bee Honey in Port Colborne, Ontario. Last year I was a student at Niagara College's commercial beekeeping program, and for my final project I created a presentation called Bee Napping, Honeybee Theft and Mitigation in Ontario. The OBA asked me to present it, and so here it is. I hope it's helpful. Beekeeping-related crime has been on the rise internationally. In Europe, this is not a new crisis. They've had this kind of crime for years. But traditionally, it consisted of small-scale thefts by neighborhood hobby beekeepers looking to replace lost bees or queens. In the past few years, however, there have been major thefts primarily aimed at removing competition in their lucrative honey industry. Producers have been the victims of well-organized crimes, including several transport trucks moving bees hundreds of miles from their home apiaries to reduce chance of detection. In New Zealand, the value of Manuka honey has prompted thefts along with beatings and even mass poisonings of bees. Organized crime has moved into the industry in a big way and has been enormously profitable for them. Authorities estimate that there were as many as 400 criminal incidents in one 6-month period. In the US, crimes are more focused on the pollination industry. Thefts there have made it into the public eye through increased popular media interest. They've even made it onto Netflix through a documentary called Rotten, Lawyers, Guns, and Honey, where they discussed almond pollination and the criminal activities it has provoked. At $200 per pollination hive, and with as many as 2 million colonies required every year, there is a very big money involved. A single bee rustling operation in Fresno, California, netted the thieves over $875,000 in 2017. The problem has expanded outside of California and has caused several U.S. states to change their laws to allow police agencies and the courts to deal with this problem as a major crime. Canada's vast lands and reduced concentration of bees in most areas help keep theft and other crime numbers down in our industry. But there have been major incidents that do get the public's attention, such as the 2012 theft in Abbotsford, British Columbia, where over $100,000 worth of bees and honey were stolen. A theft in 2016 near Montreal, where 180 colonies were taken by truck from a commercial apiary, and a significant theft in Saskatchewan last year, where $60,000 worth of bees were stolen and later recovered by the RCMP. These major thefts get public and press attention, but there are many other lower-profile thefts that are invisible to the public and the industry and are often not reported. You might hear about them on social media, but most beekeepers still carry the doubt that it could happen to them. In Ontario, there have been numerous thefts involving colonies, equipment, and even individual frames of brood. A Sarnia beekeeper suffered a string of thefts over 5 years and resulted in tens of thousands of dollars lost. A Simcoe bee breeder had specialized mating nukes with 3 colonies in each one taken. Readers of the OBA Journal will recall a story in the fall issue dealing with the Havelock farmer who had 2 colonies stolen from across the street from an occupied farmhouse. And a Baltimore, Ontario beekeeper had 3 colonies taken from within sight of his own home. These thefts were reported by the media, but many more go unreported. For instance, in Collingwood last year, a trailer loaded with hives stolen from a bee yard were taken at the peak of pollination season. In Milton, at the tech transfer yard, thieves took healthy brood frames from a hive and left empty frames behind. In Guelph, thieves have stolen beekeeping equipment, leaving the bees. In Thorold, 2 of 3 hives located on a dead-end road were removed, with the 3rd, less healthy hive left behind. These smaller incidents don't get much attention, and the police often don't even return calls. And other agencies indicated they don't keep statistics on this type of theft, so the problem just gets labeled as property crime with all the others. The only way we can get any feeling that a problem exists is through their rare news article or from social media posts and rumor. So this quote tells us a lot. The problem is not yet impacting Ontario beekeepers on a scale that has caused significant notice in the halls of the OBA or OMAFRA. But the trends observed in Europe, New Zealand, and particularly in the US demonstrate that this is an industry that is at risk, and one that needs to take the issue seriously in order to prevent future losses. But when we examine the comparative scales of bee-related crime, there is no comparison. In the US, Europe, and New Zealand, the problems are much bigger than Canada's, And that's not surprising given that the value of their industries are staggering compared to ours. But as time passes, we must keep in mind that the Ontario industry value is steadily rising, that colony loss is a significant expense to beekeepers, that competition is growing in some sectors, and that bee business are in the public eye more often because of an increased awareness of the environment, food security, and good marketing. More people are becoming involved, and that creates a greater risk. Ultimately, all of these factors contribute to the potential for beekeeping-related crime to pick up in Ontario. But will we notice when this becomes the bigger problem, and what can we do about it? So shop owners lock up their stores, cattle farms can brand their livestock and put fences up, banks have vaults and security systems, but beekeepers don't have obvious ways to create security for their apiaries and bee yards. We are faced with the challenges associated with managing thousands of living organisms that must have a freedom of movement to thrive and produce honey. For practical and legal reasons, the equipment we use must be portable and accessible. We often rely on farmers or landowners to host us on their property, making permanent installations challenging or even impossible. And while I have met at least one beekeeper who I suspect would recognize his bees if he came upon them in a field, and I'm talking about you, Dan, most of us would have a hard time swearing in court that we found someone in possession of our stolen bees. There are two broad measures that can be employed to reduce our risk. There's an old saying in the Navy that loose lips sink ships. That concept works for beekeeping as well. You can reduce the risk of having hives stolen by reducing the number of people who know your bee yard locations and who know when or the frequency that you visit the sites. For those who must know, ask them to keep the information confidential. Customers and others frequently ask me where I keep my bees, and I just give them a very general answer that usually satisfies them. As well, in several of the cases I researched, which involved thefts by former employees, so check on your employees before you hire them. And if you suspect a former employee was untrustworthy, it might be a good time to change up some of your bee yards and the locks on your honey house. Concealing the location of your hive means more than keeping secrets, though. Some thefts are simply crimes of opportunity, when someone happens upon your bees and decides they need them more than you do. To help prevent this, where possible, choose locations that provide some cover, such as behind a building or behind a berm, or in treed windbreaks, or behind high grasses or crops. Anything that prevents them from being seen from public roads help. Painting hive boxes dull colors can also help keep them from standing out. I'm always surprised to see hives placed at the side of a provincial road here in Niagara. Even a lazy thief will have no problem snapping them up, and that's a huge loss of equipment, honey, and all the efforts you put into building up that colony. Physical measures are a very effective way to reduce the risk, but unfortunately they are not always practical for beekeepers. Barriers such as gates and fences can impede crimes of opportunities and even some organized thieves, but few of us have the land or have the resources to fence in all our bee yards. You can place the hives on a yard that has some controls, but make sure that you use them. Gates left unlocked don't help anyone. Another option in risky areas is to create locking hive stands. Just lock together stacks of supers to the brood box, and that makes an assembly too heavy and awkward to move without heavy equipment. Locking the hives with a cable lock to large pallets or concrete blocks can also impede less organized thieves. One of the most unique ideas I discovered in my research is used in some parts of Germany, where beekeepers intentionally use homemade incompatible equipment. These folks were frequent victims of having frames or single boxes of bees pilfered by other hobbyists, so they made all their frames larger than would fit in standard boxes. It won't work for most of us, but if you're getting hit a lot, it might be an economical solution for you. When I started this project, it was to be primarily about using technology to solve the problem of theft. I found quite a few people working in the area and a couple dozen inventors who were trying to market their version of a theft-proof hive. What I learned is that most of these concepts were very creative, but all have very significant drawbacks. On the low-tech side is the simple device that many Ontario beekeepers probably already have in place. That's the trail security camera. In the end, it is more of a monitoring recovery tool. It can't prevent thefts, and if used as a warning device, it's more likely that the thieves will simply steal the camera. So it has to be hidden among the trees and brush. Some of these sets do have an alert function, so if you live nearby, you might make it to the site before the theft is complete. But these models all require cell or Wi-Fi coverage to function, and that's not practical for most of us. High-tech solutions are becoming quite popular in parts of Europe, and there's definitely interest in Canada and the US for these as well. Security is generally a secondary feature for these Hive monitors, but a few of the vendors are taking it seriously in their development. The available devices follow three main concepts. They're either Hive scales, motion sensors, or they contain GPS-based location trackers. I got to see several of these devices at Apimondia in Montreal last fall and researched many others. Each one has one issue or another, but some are pretty creative in how they attempt to provide solutions for us. Here are three examples of devices that market themselves as security enhancers. Beware is an example of using a Hive scale to detect movement and create an alert. It uses a smart bottom board which detects movement and changes in weights. It uploads alerts via an additional cellular Wi-Fi device that comes with the Beware package. At $340 per unit, it only fits one Hive, so you'd have to hope that the thief moved on that particular Hive, and since the device is not well concealed, he wouldn't be a very sophisticated thief if he went for it. The BuzzBox is a little more discreet, but would require a nearby Wi-Fi relay station to get the alert out. It does health monitoring, which is its primary purpose, and it's also easily detected if they went so far as to open the box up. But if they kept the lid on it, they would not know it's there, and the main security feature is a movement sensor, so it provides an instant alert to whoever's monitoring the device with their cell phone. It also has a noise detector, so you could listen in on the bees at any time, and if you get an alert and the thieves show up, you could listen in and see what's going on in your bee yard there, determine whether it's a bear, a skunk, or a thief that's moving the box around. At $230 a sensor, it's one of the more cheaper options out there right now. BeeGuard was the most practical and useful of the items I saw at Apimondia, but is an expensive service. It comes from France, and they're actually looking for local distributors. So if you're looking for a business, maybe there's your opportunity. BeeGuard includes sensors and a monitoring service, so you get a call from that service if there's a problem detected in the box. It requires cellular service available to the hives, but they're pretty close to a solution using satellite phones so that they can get to further remote locations. It's expensive though. Each sensor costs $344, and then there's a subscription cost on top of that that comes at a monthly rate depending on where you are. They have a lot of these in use in Western Europe, and there as here, the service is more aimed at really large honey or pollination operators where they move hives, and each group of hives would get a sensor, and that would help the company keep track of where they are. So the security is a secondary benefit from it. But it also has sensors in it and a GPS device so that if the hives are taken and moved away, that GPS device, which is hard to see, would follow the hives, and you'd be able to send police to the location and recover your equipment. So with the better concealment and it's instant on with movement, it's a little more practical, but that price puts it out of range for most of us. So technology is still developing, and one day we might have an affordable and effective technical solution for monitoring the security of our hives. But right now, the devices out there each have their problems along with their benefits. They are not going to be effective tools for most of Ontario's beekeepers. Despite the issues with each kind of security concept, we can still take steps to reduce the risk to our operations from theft and vandalism, and to keep bee-related crimes from becoming the problem for us that it is in other areas of the world. Individually, we can form neighborhood watch programs or join in on them. Those are already in place in some communities and are good at getting the news out that suspicious activity is going on, and maybe stymie some of these thieves as they move through areas. We can implement as many of the operational and physical security measures that will work in our operation. So if you can put a gate, you put a gate. If all you can do is try and conceal your hives, you conceal your hives. We can permanently mark our equipment for rapid identification with engraving on our boxes and frames. We can consider using technology such as cameras or sensors for those high-risk locations where we keep getting hit and where it makes economic sense to spend the money on a device like that. But above all, we must report the thefts. We got to let the police and the beekeeping community know that you have been a victim so they can watch out for your bees and also for suspicious further activities in the area. Right now, there is no one keeping track of the incidents and the cost of bee theft in Ontario. Increased reporting and interest in this issue will cause action by OMAFRA and our beekeeping organizations and clubs throughout the province. We need to create an awareness campaign. We need to develop theft prevention best practices and info sheets to distribute to hobbyists and commercial operations. We need OMAFRA and the OBA to partner with technology developers for an affordable, functional Ontario bee monitoring solution. Most of all, we need OMAFRA to collect information and statistics to determine the extent of the problem and track increases and decreases for future programs. Because if we don't know the extent of the problem, we can't really be effective at dealing with it. We track our bee diseases, and we should be treating losses from theft in the same way. We should also be asking ourselves which is costing our industry more today. Is it theft or is it diseases such as American foul brood? We have treatment recommendations for AFB, and we should have them for theft as well. So that's the presentation. Special thanks to all these folks listed here who helped me with the project and ultimately led to my successful completion of the program. I'd also like to thank Veterans Affairs for sending me back to school and to the OBA for inviting me to give you this presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it and that it helps you protect your bees.